Hey everyone, good morning. Let me unmute this. Hear all your wonderful voices. Happy Saturday.
Nice morning, Dave. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Throw in the chat where you guys are checking in from. Today I am in New Hampshire. In the car, as you can see.
Beautiful country back there.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
They've been having cold, rainy weather, but it's nice out here today.
Carrie's having beach time. Nice, Carrie.
Yes, she is. Without me.
We're on opposite ends of the country today.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually, I saw the beach out here. I saw the water in the ocean when we came in Boston.
Yeah, you got ocean out there.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, welcome you guys. Glad you guys got the new Zoom link. Hopefully everybody will realize that if they're logging into the wrong one.
Hey, Dave, I've been in Newport the last few days. It's been beautiful. The hills.
Yeah, that's where Carrie is. She's in Huntington right now.
I can't wait to see when you're going to move out there.
I know, right?
Newport.
We've been out there. We were out there, what, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah. All right. Well, when you're ready, we'll see you out here. Beautiful.
You'll keep the light on for us?
You got it.
Well, welcome you guys. Good morning. It's great to see you guys checking on here. Oh, there's Dr. Slade. Good morning.
Morning, how you doing? Sorry, I was having a hard time getting in.
Oh, you're good. Probably others might be having the same challenge with the new link, and we'll see if they figure it out. We'll give it a few more minutes here.
Yeah.
We had some last minute enrollments, like probably 20 or 30. So that was awesome.
What is that?
There's 96 people in the group right now, so that's fun.
Yeah, we had 64 this week. So
I wanted to let everyone know, I'll probably need to say this again because not everyone's on, but I did add the link to join to the featured post in the Facebook group too. So if you're ever stressing to find the email or whatever, you can always find it there. And it's being streamed into the Facebook group as well, which is pretty common for the system, this group system, right?
yeah, perfect. Appreciate all you guys are doing, Carrie and Emma and Dr. Slade. Thanks for showing up, you guys. I'm at a Super Saturday here. I just did a training on your why. Why we do the things we do. And,
Well, you're in Massachusetts, aren't you?
What's that?
Are you in Massachusetts? Is that where you are?
Yeah, in New Hampshire. Is that New Hampshire's its own state, right?
Yep.
You know, when it comes to the East Coast, I know New York, Washington, D.C.,
Right.
North Carolina, South Carolina, but you can start getting into those little tiny ones, and I'm not as
I
familiar.
know. Yeah. We don't get a lot of exposure over to the Northeast, do we?
Vermont.
I went on vacation there a few years ago to Vermont, and in one afternoon, we took a drive, went through Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island.
The states are like cities on the West Coast.
Like,
Right.
and what I found was really interesting is Massachusetts, I guess, when I went there, I guess it was a dry state. They only had one liquor store in the whole state.
Not too many DUIs out there.
And it was
Should be.
it was called the state liquor store.
Sounds similar to Utah.
One too many, right?
Hey, well, as this last week and being out here with these guys, there's a lot of core discussions going on in the cars and in the living rooms, and even when I was walking into the event here, Wendy was talking to somebody working the front desk. Do you know what core is? Do you know what core is? So it's Dr. Slade. Hang on to your hat. You know, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be reaching out.
You were mentioning, Dave, that you were training on your why this morning, and what thing I love. I mean, I love all things core. If you haven't figured that out about me, you will soon. But what, to me, the core of it is that it isn't just about your why, but it's about why your why is your why. Like really getting underneath the why. And when you know that, then everything else stems from that. It changes the game. I think changes the playing field, at least in my world. So
You would have been proud of me, Carrie. I was carrying on your mentoring, and I had people write down why, why isogenics. And when they wrote it down, they do just get to the surface levels. Like, I want to help people. Well, why do you want to help people? So I could do this. Why do I want it? Why do you want it? I want to be with my family. I want to have better relationships. Okay, why do you want to be with your family? And as you keep asking that question, it goes deeper and deeper to the core motivation. And so you'd been proud of me this morning. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Just let me mute this out. And if there's anybody else that needs to be unmuted, let me know, Carrie. I don't know if co-host can, like if Emma comes on or somebody. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for being on. For those that are new, we do have the Facebook group. If anybody is having any challenges with getting into that Facebook group where the last week's recording was, type that into the chat box here. And then Carrie will take a note of that and then help to resolve that. And that is a private group. We don't just add people in there for the sake of adding them. They need to, be pre-qualified. Also, the recordings are in there. We put them in the featured. So you'll see for last week, it was week 1 of ISACORE. So this one I titled week 2 of ISACORE, and it's streaming into there right now. So people can catch it on the rewind, or just go in there and take more notes and things that you didn't, couldn't keep up with, during the live. And then that Facebook group is for asking questions. It's awesome to see people's graphs. People that I'm working with, I'm screenshotting their graphs so I could keep referring back to it. It's been so fun to be able to point that out in our conversations. You're such a C, it's awesome. So with that, we're going to toss it over to you, Dr. Slade, and I think we're going through the 2 and then whatever else. Maybe kind of give a little bit of what's coming as well, because it's not just knowing what those letters are. You have so much more depth that we'll get into, and even more beyond that hopefully in the future we'll be able to put something together.
Yeah, I'm excited. How is there anybody that is new today that wasn't here last week?
If you're new, type a 1 into the box if you weren't on here last week.
So for those of you that weren't here last week, I would encourage you to watch that first video. We went through the C and the O, and today we're going to talk about the R and the E. I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited that been watching the Facebook group and jumping in there, and it's really fun to see you guys wrapping your brains around core and some of the benefits that it can have in our lives. And today we're gonna take last Saturday we talked about the C and the O, and C's are motivated by comfort and connection, and O's are motivated by pleasant emotion. O stands for optimism. And today we're going to get into R, that stands for resolution, and E, that stands for exactness. And again, we want you to participate, write down your questions in the chat. I want to make sure that what I'm presenting makes sense, and that we're getting through any nuances that might be helpful for you. So I will share my screen here.
Just real quick while you're pulling that up, if you guys have learned something about yourself over this last week and coming to some realizations that you didn't have before, type a 2 into the chat. It's really good to get that feedback.
Let's see. Okay, is that up? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Good. All right. So R stands for resolution, and R's are the doers among us. R's have a tremendous ability to create movement, And you'll see as we go through the different variables of the R, they are really good at getting things done. R's are almost always in motion. Even like if you watch R's, or if you are an R, if an R is just sitting there, they'll be tapping their leg, or they'll be playing with something in their fingers, or tapping on something. The R is almost always physically in motion, and and that's the result of how their brains naturally work. Resolution, it's important to understand the emotional process for the R brain. For the R, it isn't just about like getting something done, and most of the time an R doesn't finish something and look at it and just really enjoy the finished product. When something is unresolved and it comes on to the R screen, or to the R's attention, it creates emotional distress. Lost keys, or a lost TV remote. Anytime something unresolved comes to the attention of an R, it creates this emotional distress. And resolving that, or completing that, finding the TV remote, or finishing the project, or unloading my I can't remember if I said this last week or not, but last Friday, just before our first call, one of my daughters got engaged last Friday, right before our call, and she is an OR and has quite a bit of R in her. And now that like this is on her screen, and there are all these different variables that are making it difficult for them to figure out when they're going to get married and where they're going to get married, and all these different things. And that lack of like resolution is driving my daughter crazy. And that's what it does. And so when something gets resolved, that it resolves that negative emotion that the lack of resolution was creating. Does that make sense? And so anything that helps an R get things done is a useful tool. So they tend to be list makers. Most R's have several lists around their house. They might, have 5 different stickies on the counter, or different things. If you are an R and you use stickies, or a simple list that you can check off, I don't know, put a 2 or a 1 or something in the chat there, if that's the way that you keep track of what's going on. R's like to have several things moving forward at the same time, because if it's nice to get one thing done, it's even more nice to be able to have several things done. And so they will frequently be working over here on something until they can't move that any further, and then they'll jump over here and they'll move that forward. And so they like to bounce from one thing to the next and have several things moving forward at the same time. But they don't focus. The R brain doesn't tend to focus on all of those things at once. The R brain has this intense serial focus. Whatever the R is focused on gets all of their focus. And this can be a little bit challenging if you are an R, or if you're in a relationship with an R, because whatever the R is focused on, it's 100% focused on, and everything else just kind of becomes noise to what the R is. I kind of joke, any of you that are Lord of the Rings fans, it's kind of like the eye of Sauron that is just singly focused on whatever it's looking at, and everything else kind of fades to the background. R's tend to be impatient. Why? Because it's in the way of them being able to get things done that they're trying to get done. R's and E's are both really intense, but their intensity is very different. And an R's intensity is really good at propulsion. It's like a rocket engine. Their intensity produces this action. It's hot. It flares up and out, and so it's really good at creating creating movement, and it's cause and effect. Something happens and they get it done. This is one of the R's greatest strengths. They have this tremendous ability to blast it off and to create movement. But it also tends to burn out pretty quickly, and we'll get a little bit more into that in just a second. It's difficult to sustain the high level of intensity for long periods of time. It's the R brain is like an engine revving at like 6,000 RPMs, which is really good at taking off, right? At squealing the tires and getting the vehicle moving. But that's also really difficult on the body, on the system. It's almost like being in a mild state of fight or flight, where the system is just revved up, and so it's really important for the R to act quickly, because if they can't create movement on whatever they're thinking about, their intensity and that focus won't stay on that very long. An R will not stay on something that they can't do something about. And the R brain also tends to get distracted pretty easily. Interestingly, R's and O's can look kind of ADHD a lot, because if you remember when we were talking about the O, the O brain can get in the middle of anything really easily, especially if it's appealing or fun or enjoyable. The O brain hops onto things really quickly, and the R brain, if something does get the attention of the R brain will shift over there really quickly. The R's tend to get frustrated when they don't feel like they can create movement. It can be hard to do, but if you want to really frustrate an R, get something really important on their radar that they can't do something about. Kind of like my daughter's wedding plans, and it becomes really frustrating for that R brain, because it just flies in the face of what how their brains naturally work. R's tend to be pretty high on control, and it's not. You'll see E's tend to be high on control also, but it's very different. For the R, it's if I will just do it, it'll get done and it won't take forever. If I have to worry about a bunch of other people or work with a bunch of other people, then in trying to get a project done, then it'll take forever, and it gets in the way of that resolution. And so the control for the R brain is about, if I just do it, I know I can do it efficiently. I know I can get it done. And they don't like feeling like there's something in the way of their ability to get something done. And it doesn't really matter whether that's an obstacle or a person or whatever. It's in the way. This is another aspect of the R brain that can be challenging, that if you're an R, you need to be mindful of, and that is that R's tend to expect others to be ready when they are. Their focus is on getting something done. And so, and again, it's that cause and effect. Once something comes on the radar of the R screen, the R wants to get it done. And sometimes they don't stop to think that someone else might not be ready or might have another plan. And this has nothing to do, it's not about, their intention is action. It's not to be inconsiderate. They're not trying to be inconsiderate, or if you ask them, it's not that they don't care about somebody else's feelings or plans. It's just where their focus is. And if that focus is on something that you're not focused on, they will want you to be moving along with them. Another big predictable aspect of the R brain is a low tolerance for hassle. Again, why? Because it gets in the way of their ability to get things done. So for the R brain, details about how things get done are usually less important than getting it done. So they have little use for details that feel like hassle, unnecessary things. And if you're an R, you probably can resonate with this. A lot of times, if they're doing a project, every corner might not be perfectly square. They might not be coloring within the lines perfectly if you have an R child, but they'll get it done quickly. And sometimes this can be, I'll share an experience that happened. My 13-year-old is an R, and he runs it. We run into this with him with his homework all the time. He'll get an assignment or he'll get a project and he'll tear into the middle of it, and then he'll get about halfway through and realize that he's done. he didn't read the directions, and he's doing it the wrong way. But he's just, his intent is just to get it done. And so details, hassle can get in the way of the R's ability to get stuff done. R's are the only temperament that live in the future. They're constantly thinking about what comes next, and that's where their focus is. And this aspect leads to a lot of the predictable variables about the R. There are lots of things I could say about this. I'll keep going. One of the real benefits of the R's living in the future is that they get over things really quickly. They forgive easily. They don't ruminate or stew on things. When you're, and this can be kind of confusing if you're not an R, but you're in a relationship with an R, because they can be pretty intense in the thick of an argument or the thick of whatever they might be doing. And then 5 seconds later, they can be completely over it because that intensity burns itself out quickly, and they're ready to move on. My wife, I think I mentioned, is an R, and I'm an O. So O's live in the present, and we get over things pretty quickly. But my wife and I will get in an argument, and what feels like 30 seconds later, she'll say something like, "How long are you going to stay upset?" and I'm like, well, we just barely stopped. We just barely finished our argument. Give me a few minutes and we'll get over it. So this is a really wonderful aspect of the R brain, is that they don't stay upset. They don't ruminate on things. They're constantly moving into the future. I don't know, Dave, do you have examples of your living in
Oh boy. Oh boy. Everything you said is spot on. I mean, you guys just need to really internalize this beyond, there's more depth and things to correlate in our own lives on a practical level that this is going to relate to that's not being mentioned here. But if you can really write these out, maybe go back, listen to the recording, and just kind of string it out a little farther with your common sense, with this being the foundation, because you can. And everything you said is, and I've seen some of the comments, it's just, and you're right. One of the things I do want to say, I wrote down, when they seem like they're being harsh or judgmental, they're not judging the person. Like, a person becomes a thing in getting to the goal. And so they're not looking at the person and upset at them and judging them and thinking less of them at all. That is not, it doesn't even compute. This is in the way, and it's keeping me from getting there. And so I just need to remove that, ignore it, entertain it, or whatever. If that's what it needs to remain the relationship while I'm getting there. But there is not, people will take it personal, but the R doesn't mean for it to be taken in personally, and for the person to be offended. And it's really hard for an R to see the unhealthy side of an R would see that I'm not offending people when I do it this way, but you really are.
Well, but the intent, right, and that's one of the great benefits of understanding this, is because when you understand why somebody's doing what they're doing, it changes the way that you interpret it. It changes what it means. And if you don't understand this aspect of the R brain, it can feel like they're being insensitive, but it is so, and most of the time when an R finds out that they've hurt your feelings, they're going to feel really badly, because that's not what they intended to do. And this living in the future, we've been married for almost 29 years, and I don't think that we've ever finished a vacation without my wife talking about the next vacation. I mean, that's where her brain lives. And for me, if you remember, that it's difficult for the O brain to think about what comes next, what we're going to do at Thanksgiving, or what we're going to do, because I'm living in the now. And so this has to be coordinated. And my research on R really made a difference in my marriage, as we understood some of the underlying reasons why we had 5,000 arguments about these kinds of things and planning.
Let me ask a question there. And you're right, I can't turn that off. The future thing cannot be turned off. But I am worried about the corners and the details. Is that not an R? Is that more of an E in me that is
Yeah.
what the excellence behind that?
Yes, exactly. And you'll and that's when we get into E, you'll see that yeah,
And that, yes, sorry, that depends, Dave, in, living closely with you for a long time. It depends on what it is, because there are some things you don't care about the details of, like I like to use the example, and this doesn't always happen because sometimes it is important to you, but like if we're rearranging a room, I've learned that I have to hurry and vacuum underneath where the couch was before you put something else over it, because it's not as important to you as it is me. But when it's important and your focus is on, having everything be just so, then you do make sure it happens. So it's just kind of a funny dynamic to notice those kinds of things.
Yeah, so what you're saying, Dr. Slade, too, and in a business relationship, which is very similar in network marketing to a personal relationship, if people are being misunderstood on both sides of that, it gets in the way of moving forward and creating the success. So think about it that way, you guys.
And you've also, you hit on a really important thing. An RE, a primary R with a secondary E, is going to look and feel and be motivated very differently than like an RC or an RO.
Yes.
And so that presentation, and you'll see when we get into the E, that exactness and ease really bring precision and quality, and speed becomes really irrelevant to the E brain. And so, but when you get the RE dynamic going on, then getting it done and speed is really important, as is the quality of it. And so it really depends on like what aspect of your temperament gets activated.
Yeah, so that secondary could make it even more complex, but when you understand it, then the complexity is taken out, and that hard and that frustration. And that's what I saw about this program, is helping people. Like, it's changing me. Like, JoJo's got her jaw dropped with some of the things that are coming out of my mouth. Really striving to understand the blue side, or the C, and so it could be like, if you're ignorant to it, that's the frustrating part, especially when you add that secondary, because that changes things up, right? And so you think you know the person, and all of a sudden they do something, but when you understand and name it to tame it, like you're doing through this core, which is such high value, it changes it.
Yeah, it totally does. Again, I'll use my wife as an RO, and so ours tend to be pretty low on details and low tolerance for hassle, and O's tend to be low on hassle and details as well. And so she gets kind of a double whammy of that low tolerance for hassle and details. And so part of her brain really wants to get stuff done and finished, and then the O part of her brain doesn't want to deal with some of the resistance in the way. Ours are really good at blowing through obstacles, getting things done. O's are not as good at that. O's are really good at creating and thinking about things, but have a hard time with resistance and things that are in the way. This is one of the things that Dave was kind of making mention to, is that a lot of times others can feel run over by an R, because their focus is on where they're going, and everything between here and there is just in my way. It's an obstacle between what I'm trying to get accomplished. And so the strength is that living in the future and being focused on where they're going and what they're trying to resolve pulls the R through that. But if you happen to be one of those obstacles between here and where they're trying to get, sometimes you can feel run over. Again, in the R, unless you point it out, the R will probably not even realize that they've bowled you over in the process. And when they find out, again, they're either going to think that you're too sensitive, or they're going to feel bad that they've run you over. One of the two.
This, I think, is an important teamwork dynamic that I think we'll dig into it more, in the following ones. Because that is our strength and why so many are leaders of teams and things. And it can also be the demise of the R's team, because this is a relationships business. And so sometimes if other temperaments, if the R doesn't understand it, then other temperaments can feel like they're in the way, and then it can, cause some implosions in your team. The cool thing about the R brain too is that when they understand it and they remember that, to put people on the radar, it can get, even more powerful. But I also wanted to mention the future focused versus the past focus versus the now focus. That's one of the dynamics too that I have felt the pain of some of the people that live in the past. People often judge, you need to get out of the past, and it doesn't, I don't know if they're judging it, but it can sound like judgment from the stage. Get out of the past, get out of the past. And there is a true principle to the fact that, life happens in the now, and we need to do that, and we need to focus on where we're going. But there are some people that can't really get out of the past, or they can't leave the past behind. And so because I just think that too, I'm just going to mention it here, and you can obviously say what you want to about it, but it is something we'll get into down the road.
Yeah.
But I just think it's something that's important to highlight as well.
Super important. And again, I think we kind of punctuated that last week, but these are unalterable aspects of who you are. And you'll see in a minute, if you're an E, you are the E brain, and you'll see why, is going to live in the past. The C is going to be pulled a little bit into the past as he or she tries to work on things to get them settled. And so you can't change where in time you live, and you can develop skills and processes and partnerships to help you be successful in your life, in your relationships. You just have to be aware of what's going on, and then learn how to deal with that and how to capitalize on that. And the biggest thing that Carrie and Dave are both pointing out there is that, man, when you understand the strengths that a C brings to the team, and the strengths that an O and an R and an E, and over the next several weeks we'll get into a lot of that as it relates to motivation, as it relates to planning, as it relates to rallying the troops and all these kinds of things. If you know what somebody naturally brings, then you can very proactively construct your team and capitalize on people's strengths for the tasks that they most easily will do well and effectively. That's a really good point. Thank you.
If you know an R, guys, and have felt like you were offended and you took it personally, type a 5 into the chat. Please.
Okay, planning. Plans are kind of interesting for the R brain. R's will almost always have some sort of a plan, but it's not going to be elaborate. R's are typically not going to have a real complicated app or a big, Franklin Covey planner or different things that require a lot of hassle to be organized. But they do want something that will simply help them be prepared and be able to know that they can get things done. but it's not going to be a lot of hassle. It's not going to be complicated because those details and hassle get in the way of their ability to get things done quickly. But they definitely like the predictability of knowing how and when they're going to be able to get something done.
I was
Hence
doing,
the
oh,
sticky
sorry, go ahead.
notes.
Yeah,
No,
I was
you go
doing
ahead.
some research on how different types plan, and I asked our friend, like, how do you plan? She's like, I mean, I have backs of receipts that I make lists on, if that's what you're talking about. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. So anyway.
And it's a really efficient way to make sure that you don't forget something that's on your mind, right? And you can have it sitting on the counter in your back pocket or whatever, and it can keep you moving forward. And there's little that feels better to the R brain than watching those check marks happen as you get things done throughout your day. That is just like a dopamine hit for the R brain. R's tend to be reactive. Again, cause and effect. It's if you, they, I think it's the next slide here. Whoops, how do I go back here? Come on. If you push against an R, their tendency is to push back with equal or greater resistance. Why? Because the core strength of the R is to create movement. And so when they meet resistance, their strength is getting that resistance out of the way. If I had people here with me, this is one of the things that's really nice to see the difference between what it looks like when different temperaments are met with resistance. Because when you push against an R will push back harder and faster and get that resistance out of the way.
Jenna, when
If
you
you-
demonstrate this, will you take your slide, like unshare your screen so everybody can see what you're doing? Because I think this is really important.
Okay, how do I do that? Stop share. Okay. Is that, can you see me? I don't know what.
Yeah,
what
and
you're
then
saying.
if you guys can't see him in your view, you can either turn your, like in the right hand corner, you can hit speaker view and you can see him on big screen, or you can just scroll and find him. It's important to
Okay.
see what he's doing. It's simple but important.
Yeah, so when you, if this is the R, when an R meets resistance, an R will push back harder and faster. So it will push through it. The R brain meets resistance with equal or greater resistance. When a C meets resistance, the C will go with that resistance. Our C's are really good at working with momentum and going with it. They'll absorb that. When an O meets resistance, they typically will bounce out. And an O isn't going to sit in there and fight. They're going to bounce and move away from that resistance. And when an E meets resistance, as you'll see when we talk about the E, they don't move. You can push against an E and they're not going to go anywhere. They're like a freight train and they're just going to keep going in their methodical grind. And so this is one of the real defaults that you can see in what happens with an R, with each of them, with the C and O and R and E. Is that what you were talking about, Carrie?
Exactly what I was talking about. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So when you come, and this is what it feels like when you come at an R, their initial reaction, their gut level reaction is going to be reactive. Well, you do that too, or well, what are you talking about? There's this initial defensiveness that is a side effect of the strength of their propulsion. A lot of times R's will act before they think. They're quick to speak and respond. They're very good at formulating thoughts and responses in the moment. And relationally, this is so wonderful because what you see is what you get. Almost everything that comes into the R brain comes out of the R mouth. So you rarely have to wonder what your R partner is thinking or feeling, because most of the time they're going to tell you what they're thinking, what they're feeling about something. relationally, that's a really important thing. You know, one of the things that the research shows that produces trust in a relationship is transparency. It's how open somebody is. And that's defined as what percentage of what goes on inside of me do you have access to? And for an R, that's typically really high. And so it builds trust when you know what's going on inside somebody. And you get that more with an R than anybody else. Emotionally intense. We've been talking a lot about this. R's are big, quick, powerful emoters. They have a powerful presence. They're quick to laugh. They're quick to joke. They're also quick to get upset or frustrated. They feel intensely, but they're not complicated emoters. Again, what you see is what you get. And so they are a lot of everything. There are a lot of the happy and the good, and there are a lot of the intense. Single focus. The R brain, and we kind of been talking about this too. It's like a monocle or binoculars. Whatever they're focused on gets all of their focus, and everything else kind of fades into the background. And it really enables the R to zero in and move toward whatever they're trying to get moving. Initially defensive. That's what we were talking about. That's probably a better representation than what I did, but it's that initial defensiveness that happens with the R brain. R's jump to conclusions. Their drive for resolution and to get to the point. They quickly draw conclusions and immediately start moving. You start explaining things to an R, and halfway through the first sentence, they're already on the last paragraph. Their brain jumps to the end, and they're already in motion. Oh, okay, you know what? And so, and this will happen if you're reading a book. It'll happen if you're listening to something. If you're learning something new, the R will quickly jump to conclusions. That's why I kind of joked last week when we only got through the C and the O, how some of the R's might have been frustrated that we didn't get there. In conversations, this can happen. A lot of times the R can feel like a conversation is taking forever, and it can be just facts, man. Get to the point. And this can happen long before other people feel understood or ready. The R brain can think that they've already got the gist of it long before, especially a C or an E, long before a C or an E feels understood. The R brain can think that they've already got the point.
One of the funny things that I've noticed in Dave and I's conversations, and so I joke about it now and I still forget that if I ask an or question, like, do you want chicken or pork for dinner? The answer is yes. And so I'm starting to figure out that I either need to not do the either or question, because my C wants all the sides and all the perspectives. I either need to not do that or just know that probably the first one was the answer that he was saying yes to. But that can get me in trouble, because if he was only listening to anyway, so I just have to re-ask the question one at a time.
Well, and so this is a really important thing when you're in a relationship with an R. Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say the R expects the other person to already know, because duh, it's so obvious.
Right. Yeah. If you're in a relationship with an R, it can be difficult to get on the screen of an R. Because of the single focus, if whatever they're focused on, it can be really difficult to get on the R screen. And then when you are on the R screen, it's like you're, again, the eye of Sauron. All of the R energy is on you. And so this is something that really has to be proactively managed in your relationships. In your parenting, a lot of times you notice your kids might be trying to get on your screen and having a hard time getting your attention. And so then they can become kind of annoying and needy. And then when they do get your attention, it can be negative attention because they pulled you away from whatever you were focused on. And now you're kind of frustrated. And again, this is not broken. It just needs to be understood and managed. Dave.
Could this be a trait of the R? They have really good memories because when they focus, they are really listening. Like when I'm listening to somebody, they draw me in and I could feel what they're feeling in that moment. It's almost like an empath for that moment.
Yes.
Right? Because you're so intensely focused. So this has helped really well for me, you guys, like doing three-way calls where I'm listening to the other person. My intention was to get on the three-way call so they have my attention.
Yes.
So when I'm in it to win it for that person, and I'm really going to listen to them and treat them like they are the most important object in that moment and be able to respond appropriately, which is going to be successful in a network marketing business where you're talking to, people that want to know solutions and their problems. They want to share their problems. And so I don't know, do the other core temperaments have that as part of, is that a universal thing, or is that more going to be temperament to, like, I'm really focused on what you're saying and I'm hearing you, I see you?
That's a really good question. So other temperaments can do it, but for different reasons. So the research shows that when we become emotionally flooded, over 1,400 physiological changes in our bodies have been identified, from the level of cortisol increases, adrenaline increases, heart rate increases, pupils dilate, the blood vessels in the lungs dilate so that blood can be sent to the all the things. When you're emotionally flooded, your body prepares to either fight or flee, and so everything like helpful for survival gets jacked up, and everything non-essential gets slowed down. So like digestion slows down, the immune system can slow down when we're emotionally flooded. And so the physiological process at play with the R's intensity brings a lot of our senses to a heightened state. And so because of that, for that moment of focus, absolutely, the R has this heightened awareness and focus of what's going on. A C, for example, can also naturally be really good at that kind of helping people feel understood, but it's because of the connection and because of the sensitivity that the C has. And so you can have that same strength, but being driven for a very different thing.
Yeah, what I'm familiar with, it'd be, just because of knowing this stuff from what you're teaching, when you don't have an R's attention, they're not listening to you at all.
Exactly.
Like people could be having a conversation right next to me, but because I'm not focused on that, they might think I'm hearing them, but I'm not hearing a word they say, even though they're right next to me.
Totally.
So that could be the unhealthy side of an R, right? Like, I need to be showing somebody that they're safe and that they matter to me, but since I'm not focused on it, I'm not hearing them, and that could be interpreted the wrong way, or it's an unhealthy part of me.
Well, it's a natural part of you. It's a natural part of the R brain, and being aware can make you can help you manage that better. And part of that can be, hey, if your partner or your team members or whatever understand this, then they can say, hey, when can I get on your radar? When can I have your attention? And you can say, as the R, you can say, hey, I'm almost done with this and I'm really focused on it. Give me just a couple minutes to finish this up, and then I'll be with you. And so you can proactively manage that if you're aware of what's going on. Really, really good point. Because you're right. Otherwise, it just sounds like the Charlie Brown teacher, right? Wah, 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 wah. And it's just background noise that hardly hits the radar. That's a really good point. High tolerance for emotion. Yeah, go ahead, Carrie.
Sorry, I just wanted to bring up a point, but also ask it as a question. If I'm going to use the RC because they seem like they're the most opposite of each other, but also because that's, Dave and me. And so I have more experience with that dynamic. Yeah. When like I'm on an R's radar, when I'm on Dave's radar and he is focused on me, there can still be a dynamic, even if I'm getting all of his attention, there can still be a dynamic of me not feeling understood for two reasons. And one of them, and then this is where I want to ask the question too. One is that his brain moves a lot faster than mine. And so even if he's listening to me, the part that his brain might grab onto isn't really the point I'm trying to make, because I, as a C, there's lots of points that matter to what I'm saying. And so it can still leave me to feeling misunderstood. And then on my side, that it can break down because I haven't learned yet, or I haven't been willing to get uncomfortable enough to ask him to slow down and to listen to everything that I'm saying and to clarify, and to make sure that his focus is helping me feel understood and not focusing on that one little point that he can then resolve. So it's like there's more. I mean, understanding it is a really good beginning, and then there's so many things that we'll get into how to make it work well, right?
Yeah. Yep. And practice. Yeah. And it's that quickly draw conclusions, right? So for the R brain, whether it's a conversation, whether it's stuff that's in the way of completing a project, whatever, the R brain is looking for the essential components so that they can take care of those components. And for the C wants all of him or her to be seen and understood, not just, the little right-hand corner or whatever. They want the whole thing. And so, and internally for an RC, that can really create a lot of juxtaposition internally, where you've got this push and pull internally of your R wanting really to, focus on the few essential things, and your C wanting to focus on all of the things. And it can create a lot of, that's a really good point.
Can I just interject again, just to remind people that are on here, again, the biggest purpose was, let's help people move forward in their home-based business. You're an owner of your business, and let's create that success. So trying to figure out how, it allows for more allowing, because if we're not allowing people to be their R-ness or their C-ness and understanding that, then we become paralyzed, we get bound up, we get stuck. And that's what I feel like this would unlock, that stuckness that people feel because of getting personally offended, rightly so, but for the wrong reasons. And that's what we want to eliminate, and being more forgiving, like you said, when somewhere you said earlier, when you understand, you really are able to drop it, right? Or you could let it go, even though that's not your temperament. You're allowing that. You're building that skill to allow that so that you don't get stuck. You can unstuck yourself. Totally. And so many people in this business get stuck for reasons that were erroneously conceived.
Right. Yeah. Really, really well said. Yes. Ours have high tolerance for emotion. They're willing to get intense emotionally. Resolution is typically worth the whatever it takes, the fight or whatever, to get to resolution. They tend to be yellers. They function well in high stress and intense environments. And they tend to respond. I have respond well to intensity from others. What I mean, I don't mean that they necessarily are calm and collected, because the tendency is to meet resistance with equal or greater resistance, but they're not going to stay upset. They're not going to come undone when somebody else gets intense. There might be a few harsh words back and forth, and then the R brain can get over it really quickly. It's a big strength. So these are some of the great things that R's bring to society. Accomplishment. They bring movement to the world. They keep track of things. They keep us on top of things. They bring hustle and momentum. They naturally pull us toward the future. They make us aware of where today's decisions will lead. They're excellent focus on specific objectives. They provide propulsion toward goals, energy. They help humanity blow through obstacles. They bring clarity and perspective, just focusing on the essential things. They help us get things done without getting stuck on complications. They care about things that matter now. They're good at identifying the next step forward, straightforward and unfiltered emotionally. They enable and even require others to address things. They forgive and move on, and they don't allow it to build up and create problems. Such great things to society, to families, to businesses. I hope you're seeing that the C, the O, and the R now all bring such wonderful things that we would be so lost without. And if you're not taking advantage of what each of those bring, you're really missing out on a more complete picture. Questions on the R before we move into the E?
If you have any questions, type them into the chat. I haven't seen any. Carrie's been doing a great job of answering. A lot of ahas and epiphanies that are going off for people. Understanding, that's so awesome in our world.
Good.
You're doing awesome, Dr. Slade. Just better than what I had even imagined.
Well, and again, if you're an R, you probably have jumped to enough of the conclusions that you're ready to move on. So E stands for exactness. The E is the perfecter. They have this intense quest for the perfect process. They want it to be the best that it can be and better than it was. If the E brain, or not if, when the E brain is working, it's thinking about how to make something better. It doesn't matter if it's how to arrange the closet, how to load the dishwasher, how to have a conversation, how to have sex, it doesn't matter what it is. If the E brain is thinking about something, how to make a recipe, it's thinking about how to make it better. And the quest is trying to find the perfect process. I'll give you just a little example of this. A few years ago, several years ago now, I was my brother, who is an E. We were on a camp out with my nephews, and we were in Durango, Colorado, and we were trying to get loaded up. We were going to stop in Moab on our way to Salt Lake, and we were going to go on a mountain bike ride in Moab. And so we're trying to get out of there early Saturday morning. And every time my nephews kept bringing over, like they'd bring over their tent, and then they would bring over their sleeping bag, and then they would bring over their bag. Every time they brought something over, my brother would unpack the back of his 4Runner and then repack everything in. And then they'd bring something else and he would unpack it and put it back in. And I'm like, man, Dirk, we got to go. You know, we're not going to be able to do this right if we don't. And he said, I just wanted it to be better than it was when we were coming. And what he wanted to be able to do was he wanted to be able to roll down the back window and have easy access to his cooler where his Diet Cokes were. And he wanted it to be more efficient in his brain than it was when he was coming. And that's how the E brain works. E's are very detail oriented, where O's and R's tend to not get too lost in details. The E brain gets very into the minutia of things. They, like ours, have a very high tolerance for negative emotion, but the E's tolerance for negative emotion, there's this willingness to slog through things, to go cross grain, upstream, in order to do them the right way. They're extremely motivated to figure out and research the best way. There's little that the E brain enjoys more than researching the best way to do something. And it doesn't matter, like, whether it's the best way to, the best shoes to buy, or the best way to make. I had a client who got into making olive oil, and she researched like where around the world you could get the best olives and the different flavors. And totally, the E loves to research the best way. E's can do a lot of shoulding. They tend to ruminate on things, and they can be really hard on themselves and others. Because I think this is true. I don't believe that I've ever heard an E say that something was perfect. There's always something that could make it better. And so they do a lot of, well, I should have said this. I should have done this. It would have been better if. And if you're in a relationship, either if you're an E or you're in a relationship with an E, this is really, really important to understand. because there's a really fine line between this could make it better and it wasn't good enough. And a lot of times when you're in a relationship with an E, it can feel like nothing is ever good enough. Because the way the E strength is always seeing, well, yeah, okay, so you loaded the dishwasher, but it would have been better if you would have done this, or yeah, you cleaned the toilet, but it would, or whatever. And so that strength can really become a challenge relationally if you don't understand this. E's have a very high level of fairness or justice. Again, it's right and wrong. The E brain is really black and white in its thinking. Control is also really important for the E, but for a different reason than it's important for the R. For the R wants to be in control so they can not be impeded in their ability to get things done. The E wants to be in control so that they can make sure it's done correctly. And if I do it, then I know that I can make sure that it gets done correctly. E's love a good plan. Predictability is really important to the E brain. They love to know that they're going to be able to do things the right way. And so and I don't know, in those of you that have the book, I think most of you have the book in one form or another. In the E chapter, I have a camping list from an E friend of mine. And if you're not an E, you'll be in awe at the detail of that list, because it tells you not only what to bring, but it's color coded. It's different brands are recommended, because the E loves to be prepared for whatever. We went to Hawaii not too long ago with some friends of ours, and he's an E, and he had a Google Doc with restaurants and choices at restaurants and hikes, and I love going on trips with him because his E brain does all the research, and one of the people that were with us were like, I'm sorry that you had to put so much effort into this or whatever. And he's like, no, it was the best thing in the world. The E loves to do that kind of preparation. They don't like to be caught off guard. And they typically struggle a little bit when something doesn't have a place yet. If they think they have something understood, and then all of a sudden they learn something else, or they find out about some other variable that they weren't aware of, it discombobulates them for a little bit, because they like to know how things fit together. So where an R likes to plan, and we're going to get into planning in a couple of weeks, but where an R likes to plan simply, the E's are the complicated planners. These are the people that love a great planning system that's going to make sure that they can capture all the details, and that they're not going to miss anything. E's are very willing to invest. They're willing to invest time and energy and resources in what they deem as good quality. An E would rather have a few really good things than lots of mediocre things. This is also one of the most predictable aspects of the E brain. Avoidance becomes a really important thing, because they avoid things if they don't think that they can do it the way it should be done, or the right way. And so if again, an E thinks through things and settles on the best way to do them, and if they don't feel like they can do them that right way, they will sometimes sit at that crossroads for a long time and stall movement until they feel like they can do it the right way. And so in a business, this can be a big thing, right? You can have in your mind like the perfect way to approach somebody, or the perfect way something's supposed to go. And if you don't think that it's going to, you can sit, and this is the, kind of back to the primary and secondary. This is where that RE combination can be really great, because the R part is going to compensate for this challenge. Where the E might sit there and like, oh, I can't do it, perfectly yet, and so I'm going to wait until I can do it perfectly. The R part is going to require propulsion and movement. Authority. E's are their own authority on things, on how things ought to be done and what ought to be done. They think through things so thoroughly that they have a very high level of confidence that the way that they think or the way they think something should be done is the correct way. And so if you disagree with an E, their initial response is going to be to think that you're wrong. And it's not, and again, it's not that you're dumb or they think that they're smarter than you or whatever, but the internal process is typically something like, well, if you knew what I knew, or if you had this piece of data, you would also land on this conclusion because it's obviously the right conclusion, and you just don't have the information so that you can see it clearly. Does that make sense? And so again, relationally, this has to be managed, and really important that you be aware of it. Very black and white in their thinking. Both C's and E's are very internal processors, but that internal processing is very different. For the E brain, there's a right way, and there's all other ways. And for the C brain, remember the C brain is stew, and everything is a possibility, right? The C has this ability to see things from all these different perspectives, and but the E's quest for the best drives it to settle on the right way to do it. Now, a really important point here is what the objective is what determines what the right way is. Again, I'll use backpacking as an example because I think it's a pretty easy one. If I'm going backpacking and my goal is efficiency or speed, then what's going to be the right way? It's going to be a light pack, light bedding, easy and light food, right? Light shoes that I can go quickly in. That's going to be what determines the right way. Well, if my objective on that very same trip is comfort, then my backpack's probably going to be heavier because I'm going to be carrying some steaks and some dessert to cook up, and I'm going to have a big fat bedroll that I'm going to be comfortable sleeping in. And so what the intended objective or outcome is what determines the right way. And this is really important when you think about when you disagree with somebody, if you're an E or if you're in a relationship with an E, because if you step back and say, oh, well, maybe the objective that I'm trying to accomplish here isn't the objective that the other person is trying to accomplish. And so if you can look at it from another objective, then it changes what the right way is. Does that make sense? Okay. They think things through very thoroughly. They tend to examine things thoroughly. They can get frustrated if they don't feel like they can wrap their brains around something. Again, the E loves to get into the minutia of things, and it's really frustrating if they don't understand a concept or they're met by an obstacle that they can't figure out. And lots of times, I mean, I've had E clients who, one example, I had somebody once who was writing a letter to their children and worked on that letter, had some things that they wanted to communicate to their kids, and they worked on that letter for 2 years, writing and rewriting and revisiting, because they wanted to make sure that it was kind of sensitive. They wanted to make sure that it really presented what they wanted to present in the best way possible. Would an R ever do that? No.
Well, and an RE together is funny to me in this process. Or it can be funny, but it can also be really, really helpful. There's one quick example of, I was trying to leave town and I was taking Dave's car, and I wanted to leave by a certain time, and he wanted me to be able to have a really good experience in his car. So he was trying to sync my phone with his radio. And so he wanted to resolve it. And he spent 2 hours trying to figure it out, because he's a mechanic and he believed he could. And then that R.
Be able to, right?
Yeah, so he has a really strong amount of both of them. And I, at this point, thankfully had understood core. And so I was able to just sit back and laugh at it until finally it was like, honestly, I need to go. It's fine. But anyway, funny.
That is a good example. And again, that intent of like, yeah, and that ability and willingness to stay in there and slog through is that E strength of perseverance that is so nice. E's tend to be slow to trust in others' opinion. They have a lot of confidence in what they think is right. And so there has to be some reason for them to believe you know what you're talking about. And this comes as a result that they've thought through things so thoroughly that, again, if you knew what they knew, you would also agree with them. And so in network marketing, in a business like this, if you're trying to sell to an E, there's going to have to be some reason why that E is going to categorize you as one who knows. Because otherwise they're not going to think, and that can be research, that can be data, that can be, personal experience or whatever. A lot of times when I'm talking about core to E's, I'll be met with something like, I've heard many times, I hate this. I had somebody tell me once, I was talking about this and she said, I hate this. And I was like, well, it kind of hurt my feelings a little bit. And I said, why do you hate this? And she said, I hate that you're describing me so accurately. E's are their own authority on things, and they don't want anybody else to be telling them what they think or what they believe or why they do what they do, because they're their authority. But one of the things that also happens is that once an E categorizes you as one who knows, once they have a lot of respect or put stock in your opinion, then they become raving fans. I mean, then you are their person. You're their authority on whatever that subject matter is. And they will be by your side, and they have, I think it's on here in just a second here. They will have a tremendous amount of loyalty. E's are very loyal. When you're in, well, we'll talk about that in just a second. They don't like feeling out of control emotionally. So control shows up twice in the E brain. One, it shows up in the, I want to be in control of things so that I can do them the right way. And then also the E doesn't like to feel out of control emotionally. They like to be organized emotionally. And so when an E gets disorganized emotionally, their tendency is to go inside. They tend to withdraw. They want to go inside, get things figured out, and then come back out. Since the E's are the most internal processing of any of the temperament types, once an E gets reorganized emotionally inside, it's done for them. And a lot of times that can leave other people feeling left out and wondering what in the world has happened. And so you have to remind yourself, if you're an E, that after you've organized yourself, it's still important to let your partner in so that they feel connected to you and so that they know what's going on inside as well. This is super predictable in the E. Where an R is in constant motion, E's have tremendous ability to be physically still. Yoga, meditation. E's almost have kind of a regal bearing. They hold themselves kind of still and regally, and they have an ability to be still internally and externally. E's feel things super intensely. They feel very strongly about what they think. And that's a really important thing, that not necessarily even about what they feel really strongly about what they think. And their thoughts can become almost sacred to them. when when you ask an E a question, I'll talk about that in just a second. They can feel overstimulated by things or situations. Their emotional intensity, where the R intensity is like a rocket ship that flares up and out really quickly. The E's intensity is a slow, deep, intense burn. It's like a diesel engine or a freight train that just chugs and chugs and chugs and can just keep barreling through obstacles, but they don't blast through them. They just persevere through them. Consequently, it can take E's a long time to get over something, to let something go and move on, because it keeps, again, I think it's the next, well, in just a second. It takes the E brain lives in the past. Let's talk about it right now. Should I go forward? And E's live in the past. Why do they live in the past? Because the E brain looks at anything and sees how it could have been better for the next time. So they look to the past to see how to make the future better. And so so to see how to make something better, you naturally look at what has happened to see how to tweak it, how to make it better so that you can do it better the next time. E's are slow to warm up. They don't share what they're feeling easily. They tend to be private by nature, and they become really invested in their thoughts, feelings, and conclusions. And they're reluctant to share their feelings unless there's a high degree of trust. So you can watch this if you're in a relationship with an E. You ask an E a question, and their brain will do this little kind of processing, and they typically decide, like, how badly do you really want to know? Are you just being socially appropriate, or do you really want to know what I think about this? Because if an E is going to share something, they're going to share the whole story with you. When an E tells a story, they walk you through the logical path of how they landed where they landed. And so they're not going to do that unless they feel like you're really interested, because to them, it feels like they're casting their pearls, because they're so invested in their thoughts and feelings. And so they're reluctant to just willy-nilly, what feels to them like willy-nilly sharing what they think or feel. That makes sense. Mental organization, logic more than hearts or feelings is what drives the E. They want things to make sense and to be right. They can feel frustrated if they feel rushed, because they again, their strength is being able to persevere and do something the right way and slog through that. And so if they feel rushed, it really kind of can be frustrating for the E. And fear of failure, not fear of people, is what drives the E emotionally. They want to do things the right way, and if they don't feel like they can, it's really hard for the E to do something halfway. Sometimes feelings can feel like they get in the way, and can just be this complicating noise. So a C is really good at sitting in emotion. Sometimes the emotion and the feelings can feel like noise to the E brain. Okay, unique contributions. Quality. E's bring quality. They help humanity remember and learn from the past. Tremendous mental fortitude, tenacity, and persistence. They help society understand how things work and fit together. Expertise, precision, discipline, and control. Logic, dispassionate decision-making, preparedness for now and the future. Confidence. They pressure humanity to do things well. And loyalty and identity. These are some of the wonderful things that E's bring to the table.
There was a question earlier on, which I think would be good to answer. So it was when we were talking about should, and the question was, do C's do that too? As far as I should have done this or said this as a way of wanting to make things more comfortable, and an unhealthy C beating oneself up, or is this just an E trait?
Good. Do you want to talk about that? You want me to?
Well, I did respond to it in the chat. I think it's an everyone trait. I think all of us should on ourselves sometimes. So getting at the reason why we're doing it, like, am I saying I should have done this better or that better because I'm emotionally uncomfortable about what I did say or do, or because I'm really wanting to fit in and I'm trying to make myself different so that I can fit in? That would be different than I should have said it this way because, or you should have said it that way because I didn't say it good enough and it could have been better. Like that's where the difference is, right?
Yeah. So again, it's the underlying why. So when the C brain ruminates, it ruminates because it feels unsettled emotionally. And so when the silt gets stirred up, the C brain will sit and ruminate and process that silt, that emotional unsettlement, until it gets settled. And so in that process, it can do lots of shoulding and lots of and I wish, and but it's being driven because of that emotional unsettlement. And the E is more like, that didn't work right. I thought that was going to work and it didn't. And it would have worked if I would have done that. And I should have done this. And so it's a different kind of shoulding. C's and E's will should themselves much more than O's and R's. And again, that comes back to the external versus internal processing. C's and E's spend a lot of time inside their heads. O's and R's don't spend much time inside their heads. And so there's just less processing and therefore less shoulding.
Yes, which brings to, somebody just typed this comment in that goes right along with the other thing that I wanted to maybe have you touch on a little bit, is Leah Perry had said, oh, it sounds like emotion versus logic. So my son is an EC and his girlfriend is a CE, and they were talking about this just the other day. Of, she was like, but my feelings aren't wrong and it's okay for me to feel a certain way. And he was like, but you live from your emotions, like they drive you. And neither one of them was wrong. Like they were both right. So we have emotion brain, we have logic brain. It seems like C's and O's are more emotionally driven and R's and E's are more logically driven, but that doesn't mean that R's and E's don't have feelings and that they don't feel. And it doesn't mean that C's and O's can't be logical, but we are more emotionally driven. So do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Well, yeah, and actually R's and E's are more intense than C's and O's. And so R's and E's have a lot of emotion and emotional intensity, but it's different. And it's and the E is really driven by logic, tries to be. And part of what frustrates the E a lot of times is that either their emotions or somebody else's emotions are making things cloudy and complicating things. And if we could just look at the logic and just look at the facts, then it wouldn't be so complicated. Where C's and O's, like you said, are very emotionally driven. And again, driven differently emotionally, right? The C is driven very much by comfort and things feeling settled and comfortable. And an O is driven very much by things being pleasant and enjoyable and wanting things to be light and buoyant.
Yeah, for me, I feel like I prioritize all emotions, like positive and negative, and it's really important to me to get to the feelings of someone first, because then it's easier to move it away and then get to the logic. If I just try and get rid of the emotion, it's like not going to work. One other question that also was something that I wanted you to clarify, but she says it much better. Kelly Granger said, you touched on figuring out their objective to be on the same page. I think this is as far as like the E is an authority on what they think and like they have to research. So you touched on figuring out their objective to be on the same page, but how do you connect with them to share another perspective when they're so focused on them being right? They are.
That's a challenge. It really, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was just writing something that I like. I'll try to frame it up. Tell me if I do a good job. The goal, that's the R, right? That's the R, the goal, the objective, or the feelings. And, there's the C's. The goal and the objective and the feelings that we want to get out of this program. I wrote it down here. I just want to read it. To not look at everyone else as the unhealthy core temperament. And I'm good in your own temperamental way, right? So grow ourselves first, our own work that we need to do on ourselves, and then exemplify that in your interactions with others, and don't try to fix other people. And that's another reason for this program that I see it extending, because you guys are going to get so much value out of this for yourself, and you're going to wish so-and-so was on, and why didn't I invite this person? I should have been more adamant about it. What I see happening, and it's going to need to be worked out, obviously there's going to be a higher cost for sure. But having a level 2, a level 3, and we're still going to get into more besides the core temperaments here. You're going to talk about more in-depth stuff. But we could go, this is a lifetime pursuit. So again, being the best that you can be, start looking at the things that are your weaknesses and where you can move up that spectrum, not trying to change yourself in the wrong way. This is giving us a healthy way to grow and expand. And then just be that, exemplify that. Your business is going to do better, and people, the way they respond back to you is going to be better because of your understanding. Does that make sense?
Makes really good sense. And I would add to that you can do just the opposite of that as well. You can either say, well, yeah, the way that my brain works is the right way and everybody else is wrong. You can also say the way that everybody else does this is right and the way that I work is wrong. And neither is true. Right.
That's a good point.
It's you can really get on either end of the continuum there and end up missing the point where the reality is that temperamentally none of us is broken. And by learning how to be a healthy you and how to appreciate and interact with healthy versions of those around you, then you can just really excel and take off. That's really good point.
Yeah, and I think to further that, because Kelly came back and said, yes, but how do we connect with the E's though? Which is was my question too, because sometimes, yes, we need to be healthy ourselves, healthy us's in order to have healthy relationships, whether that's, family relationships or work relationships. And it's important to understand too, that part of being healthy in network marketing and part of being healthy in a family is connection as well. So there needs to be both going on. If I'm just going to isolate and be a better version of me first and then prioritize my relationships, I might have missed the boat. Is there a way that you can explain that in a better way?
Can I just one thing before you do that? That's what I meant in including working on yourself, learning this stuff so you can know how to communicate with other people. Exactly what Carrie was saying. And that's what I meant by working on, that was included in there. Yeah. That's not something that you get to shun off, you guys, and not do that really hard work of understanding other people.
Right. And so two thoughts on this. One is when the E-brain, kind of back to the objective, right? When the E-brain gets focused on figuring out the best way to communicate, the best way to connect, then all of the E strengths become very beneficial relationally. My oldest daughter, Rachel, is a really good example of this. She has a degree in human development now. She's just about finishing up law school. She's one of our core coaches, and she is an E. She's a primary E, and she does such a good job of engaging with people where they are. So her CE husband, she knows what he needs, and she will sit there and listen to and process and sit in there with him. And her RO mother, she knows how to interface with her RO mother and with her OC dad. And she was just here for a week, And I watched her almost in awe. And I thought of this very thing, Kelly, where her E-ness was on full display in the objective of nurturing and connecting relationally. And so if you're trying to get that of an E, then you've got to get their attention, right? So you have to talk to the E and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. Because again, an E wants to do things the right way. And so if you can get their attention and say, I want this kind of relationship with you. Are you interested in this as well? You have to get their E brain to be on board with you. And so you can ask for that specifically. And a lot of times we're afraid of that vulnerability, right? We're afraid of saying, hey, this is how I'm feeling, or this is what I need. But if you do, E's tend to respond pretty well. They may be initially defensive because they're not focused on that. But once they become focused and aware on it, E's can do relationships really, really well. Did I answer that?
Perfect answer. Profound. I unmuted Katya because I feel like this is like a big part of what is one of the bigger paralyzers in this industry. Do you just want to express your feelings on that question or comment, Katya?
Sure. It's like what I put in the chat. It's, when you go to trainings like in Isagenics, you have the successful people that are being put up on stage. And they're like, oh, yes, and I do this and I do that. And then it's like,
this is the right way.
This is the right way. So if you just do what I do, you'll be successful, right?
Right.
And then I try to do what they do and it doesn't work for me. And then I feel like, well, it's me. I'm not worthy of this. I'm not good enough to do this. I'm the failure, because if it works for them and this is the way, then if I apply the same way, then why doesn't it work for me? So I really have had struggles with that way of trainings that I've seen, because it took me a while to realize it's not me. It's just not my way of doing it. And then but bringing that up, and Dave, we're just gonna, if you're okay with this, we can talk about this. I had this struggle with Dave's mentoring, right? Because he was mentoring me, and then when it didn't work out, and for me, the more I thought, or the more I followed Dave's way, the more I disconnected from my goal. And then I was like, well, then it's just not for me. I must not be right in this business. It doesn't work for me, right? And it was really hard. And not until recently, when we actually talked about this, and totally when we were talking about the R, and seeing how unintentional it was of Dave, but how hurt I felt on the other side. And we never talked about it. And not until recently. And then when we just opened up about it, we were like, oh my gosh, Dave was like, I didn't want to make you feel this way. And I was like, oh my gosh, I should have spoken up earlier. But just going back to the whole network marketing thing, I hope more people sign on to this kind of training, because you're not connecting with your team if you're not understanding their thought process or what makes them tick. And then it's just effort wasted. It doesn't land right. And people don't feel seen. And this is what this industry is all about, right? We say we welcome everyone, show up as you are. But then if we're not able to connect to them the way they are, they feel disengaged and frustrated and say, this whole network marketing thing, what they always say, everybody is so happy, it doesn't work for me because nobody pays attention to me. I'm not getting support. And it gives a bad taste to network marketing if we're not going
Dr.
on that emotional level.
Thank you so much, Katya, and I'm glad we were able to finally resolve that, and at least work on resolving it. And I think in the business environment, 100% of the time, they don't address this on this level. There's some things out there like leadership and self-deception, really strong, powerful information, but it's not it's not universally wide and accepted and not being taught. And so, like Katya says, show up as you are, but we're going to treat you like an E.
Right.
Unknowingly, ignorantly.
Right.
And so ignorance is not bliss. In this case, it causes the failures, it causes the heartaches, it causes the, all of the stuff we're not trying to create.
Absolutely. And so well said. And I also have to just appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to share, because that's super awesome as well. And benefits all of us with that kind of vulnerability. So thank you for that. And really highlights the exact reason why we're doing this. And it's not malintent, right? It's when something works for you, you think it's going to work for anybody, right? And we think that that other people's brains work like the way our brains work, because that's all we've ever lived. And so you can't do what you don't know. And so that's by teaching, teaching people about this and helping them learn how to be healthy versions of themselves and how to help other people be healthy versions of themselves, you can get around that because it's the strength of the E to look for the process, right? What's the process that works? And once they figure out that process, then they want to replicate it and they want to help everybody else replicate it. And so that's the strength of the E. And so then it very much naturally comes across and in the self-help, in the mental health world, in the business world, we run into this all the time, because it's like, this is the way to make it, right? This is the thing that's missing from this. This is the magic sauce. And in reality, it's unless you happen to be the same temperament of whoever wrote that or is saying that, then it's not going to be the magic sauce for you. And so it really is about learning how to be a successful you. And because like we said last week, you're never going to be, if you're a C, you're never going to be as good at being an E as an E is. And if you're an R, you're never going to be as good at being an O as an O is. And so by what Dave said a minute ago, by bringing what you naturally bring to the table, everybody gets, right? A rising tide lifts all ships, and everybody gets to benefit as everybody's able to do what they do best in the team. And we're gonna get into that a lot over the next several weeks here.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if you can kind of give them a little bit of a preview. Like, what more is there to go in? I feel like I've learned it all, right? But there's so much more. And I love that you give the practical application. It is a little abstract, you guys, but it's less abstract than reading the book and reading some of these incomplete programs that are leaving things out. And so really try to sit down and take that abstractness, these principles, and how am I doing, on both sides? Where are my weaknesses? Where are my strengths? And try to just match those up on a piece of paper and draw out your own little blueprint with all the diagrams and stuff on whatever you need to do and whatever your temperament, likes to discover those things in that way. And just a reminder, these few, how do I talk to these people? You're going to talk more about that, but also we're going to have more levels of this. I can already see it. It's going to happen. We're going to offer it. And, so there will be a continuing education that you can invite people into. And ultimately, I would love to see Isagenix pick this up as a program like we used to have with the Healthy Mind and Body. If you agree, and if you're getting value out of this, type a 1. If you feel like all of us holding hands and singing Kumbaya right now, put a 1 in there, But also,
no, put value, because I would love to save this chat so we have it to show Isagenix. And number 1.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Yes.
Reach out to Kathy. Reach out to Dr. Plant. Reach out to your rep, Chris Nish, and Mac Larson, and let them know what value this would be that Isagenix is missing. And I know that they do the right things. We just got to get that across to them. So yes, thank you so much.
Malcolm, I don't know where you are, but that looks really fun.
I was just going to say, Malcolm, I knew you were skiing, and it's fun to see you here. Awesome.
Yeah, he's our professional.
So we're going to help you how to plan, how to approach somebody, how to listen to somebody. And you know, we're going to keep offering different levels of this to help you implement. And in our one-on-one coaching that we have, it's really hard for most people to just listen to something or hear something and be able to implement and execute on it. Most of us need help in being able to do that, and we want to offer that help. So yeah, great insight and points.
So Carrie, can we save that? I forgot to record it. If I hit recording now, it'll save this last little part. Maybe that'll save, record to my computer.
It,
What can we do so we don't lose that?
the chat,
Yeah, and yeah.
there's a place, there's 3 dots. Actually, I can save it from my computer. I just found it. So never mind. It is saved in the Facebook group, so no panic.
Oh, good.
There it is.
The video is, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think
the
it
video
shows the chat in the zooming in live. It doesn't show the chat.
Yeah, the chat doesn't show, but I wanted to save this chat because there's so many really awesome points that have come out and questions and comments about how valuable this is. Because like Dave said, it's abstract. I would say complicated. It's not necessarily abstract. The more you learn about it, the more sense it makes. But it's complicated because humans are complicated and we are all human beings. And so the more that we can learn how human beings work and interact with each other, the better we can be in our lives and in this business. And I'll just say, like, I get so emotional. My C-ness gets really triggered with this, triggered in a good way, because this is like the number one, well, I can't even say that. I don't have a number one. This is one of the main reasons why I have decided to do a lot of what I'm doing and why I've been nudging both Dave and Dr. Slade to make this happen, because this is so important. And now that you guys are seeing it too, that you can really benefit from understanding that being you isn't broken, and also being someone else is equally not broken. None of us, we're not broken. We've learned unhealthy things. We've learned ways of coping. We've learned, I spent a lot of years trying really hard to be an R and an E. And so I've learned some skills, but I could never do that well. Because I didn't like being, well, I didn't know I was a C, but I didn't like a lot of what was me. And the more that I let myself, then I still have moments when I wanted to just shut the C in the closet and be something else. But most of the time when I'm letting myself be a healthy me, my life just goes better and I feel better and I relate better to people. And so I get really emotional, and I'm being like, squishy right now, but I just wanted to let you guys know, thank you for joining. Thank you for your comments and for really, really putting in the work to get this, because it's really easy to say, okay, yeah, that's awesome. Now let's get back to learning how to be an R, or let's get back to learning how to, be like that person on the stage. So anyway, thank you.
Yes, and there's that squishy is good, Carrie. I mean, that's what you bring to the table, right? And that's not broken. And I will just say that it is both kind of complicated and you can go as deep as you want in this, and it's really easy and makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
it's both. And that's why I developed it. Because there are a lot of programs out there, a lot of personality profiling systems that are so complicated that they're not very user friendly. And as an O, I don't do complicated very well. And so you can absolutely become an expert in this, and it will revolutionize your lives.
So the work you guys to do, like, we already have our seated philosophies, our governing guiding mechanisms that we've learned, we've habitualized, and that's kind of like a rut that we dwell in. It takes a lot of effort, energy, focus, culture, support to evolve your philosophy. And that's what we've got to do with this. We don't just hear it and be hearers of the words. We want to start applying it. And so you really got to sit down and write and revisit this stuff and really internalize it so that you can start to adopt it as your evolved philosophy. It's just like, Jesus said, you can't put new wine into old bottles. You got to put them into new bottles. So we've got to become this philosophy. And that's not easily obtained, but Dr. Slade has made it easier. And it makes it, you know, on a practical level, we have the vehicles to apply it to with our relationships, our businesses, but really understand that you need to internalize, you can choose to internalize these things and make them a part of you. But that's repetition and understanding, and you can't just get on this Zoom and make a post here and there in the Facebook group and adopt it as your philosophy. It's going to take some work, and that's going to be up to you to choose whether or not you really want to do that. Again, thank you, Dr. Slade. We're only 2 weeks into this, like somebody had pointed out, and look at what's like, already things are happening and changing. So we appreciate that so much. And you are adopting some of it as your philosophy automatically by being on here. Finish it off, right? So any last thing you want to share before we check out? And I know you're going on vacation or something. You said you're going to miss a week. Is that next week or?
No, next week I'm here. It's the week after that. So we're good.
Okay.
Of course.
All right, you guys.
With Go Bucks,
Any?
What?
Of course, you have to end it with Go Bucks.
Well, somebody did it.
Well, I'm sorry, I just muted you out. I just unmuted everybody. You need to unmute yourself again if you guys want to give a shout out.
Yeah, I just said somebody had just given a shout out to the Buckeyes, so I had to respond.
All right, you guys, you can unmute, share your love, and
at Kirkwood, 9,000 feet.
Oh,
like
nice.
Thank God.
Office?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty good office.
Go, Malcolm, go. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr.
Oh, this is
amazing.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so
Great.
much.
Great session.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Love you guys. Thank you, love all you guys.
Enjoy the day.
You're awesome.
Great.
Dave,
training.
awesome.
you.
Everybody's awesome here. Thank you
Thank
for this.
you.
This is a gift. This is a gift.
Carrie.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Carrie.
Have a
Thank
great
you,
weekend,
Dr.
everybody.
Slade.